tonight, eh?
Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Okay, so now we're halfway through Blair Kooistra month. Did you know Blair Kooistra month was April, Blair?
It should have been March, but I'll let it slide.
No, I looked it up, and it said the best month for Blair Kooistra month on the AML network would be April.
Well, there we go.
Because halfway through April is my birthday.
Well, I just had mine yesterday, so happy birthday to me, right?
Ah, I see. Okay. And now you're a stunning 48.
Oh no, 58. That was a foobar on the keyboard. That one.
Dewey, that was just a guess.
Oh well, good job. I wish you were at a carnival. I could win some money off.
Yeah, I was trying to be polite. Actually, you look like you look 68 to me, but
that's just Photoshop.
So Blair.
Yes.
May I be so forward as to call you Blair?
You may, Mr. Strang.
Okay, that's perfect. So we had the first episode of your interviews, and before we had, which was released on April 2nd, the day after April Fool's.
That's right. Appropriate.
And somewhere in the month of March, somebody pointed me towards your Vimeo dish version of your presentation that you did at Winter Rail.
That's correct. Yep.
So I, with my limited technical ability, was able to get it on my big screen TV, and I just wanted to tell you how spectacular it was.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah, it turned out really well. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it.
It looked
True labor of love.
Yeah, it looked like it was worth it. Or hard. I mean, a lot of work.
Yeah. Had to learn all kinds of new computer stuff to do that.
Oh, did you? Like what kind of stuff?
Well, I had not edited sound files much before, so I had to learn all that stuff. And I do so few of these Photo Magico. That's the program I use to put the whole thing together, Photo Magico. I do so few of these that when I put them together, it's like having to relearn the whole software again.
Right,
so,
right.
You know how that is, right?
Yeah, Photo Magico.
Photo Magico. That's for Macintosh. It's very similar to a product called Pro Show, which most of these other shows are usually put on, and that's mainly a PC platform.
Okay.
Same kind of thing, though.
Are they still making PCs? Because isn't Mac just the best computer you can buy?
What's a PC? I haven't seen one in my house in over a decade.
I know. Right now, Stuart Sterling, former F1 ace, I believe he won Monaco in '77. Anyways, he'll be driving probably on his UPS truck, and he hates Mac. He hates his iPhone. He hates Mac. He hates iTunes. He was complaining to me the other day that his iTunes didn't sync up with his PC, and I'm thinking, well, that's because you're trying to pull your UPS truck with a Volkswagen engine.
Well, I have friends that are diehard PC people, but they're also the people that I read posts from on Facebook that are complaining about it not doing this or not doing that.
Exactly.
Right.
So what'd you call it? Photo Magico?
Yeah, that one's Photo Magico.
I never heard of that one. So is it so you didn't, it's not like I'm going to check that out. And it's fairly easy to use. I edit all the podcasts on something called Audacity.
Yeah, that's what I download. That's what I had to learn how to use to put the show together. Someone recommended Audacity, and there's a learning curve in there, and there's so much more to that than I needed. You know, it's like most of these computer programs. You can do what you need to do with like the top 10% of the features, and the other 90% are for the real hardcore techies or
exactly
computer nerds. Yeah, same kind of thing.
When I was starting a podcast, I was trying to figure out Audacity and get the sound better, and I stumbled across a YouTube video, and the guy says, "You want to use Audacity and he was doing, I think, videos or something for gaming. And he says,
Uh-huh.
use these 3 buttons. And I did, and it worked perfectly. And the other 90% of the stuff I've never even touched.
I should go look at that again before I do my next show. But I had to buy a microphone and everything. So, and then I had to take over the master bedroom closet because it had all the clothes in it to deaden the sound. So that became the studio to do the voice tracks.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, my studio is my workshop for model building because it's got so much stuff in it. The sound just sucks in and it works out perfectly.
Absolutely.
All right. So how long do you think it took you to do this?
Well, probably most of the month of January, and then going back and obsessing about where the dissolves were, and the pacing of photographs, good transitions between photographs, and then going back and cleaning up live audio that I had recorded at a old timers picnic, and going in and rolling all that together. See, through Photo Magico, I think you could put 4 tracks of audio in there, but anytime you drop a new slide in, it might. Now you can lock down where the transitions are, but
right.
Sometimes that'll adjust. If you throw more pictures in there, it'll throw off the whole shittery with the where the dissolves are. So what I decided to do with using Audacity is to just build an audio track and then drop all my sound in there with my music and my narration and any live sound, and put all that together and then drop that in as one piece into the Photo Magico. So that's how I did it, but you don't have to do it that way.
That's a good way to do it. And did you think about using iMovie at all? Because that program, as simple as it is, works pretty good.
No, it's like I'm not a big fan of all. As much as I love the Macs, I'm not a big fan of all the native programs that come with it.
Right.
So, they had Aperture, which I guess they dumped, but they had Aperture for doing photo editing and all that. Well, I just stick to Lightroom and Photoshop by Adobe, and you could do a slideshow together. You could do a slideshow through Aperture, but that's pretty basic compared to what Photo Magico can give you. So.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool video, let me tell you.
Now, be sure to share the link on your Facebook and your
I'm gonna
website there, so that'll be good.
And are you gonna keep it up for a while, or?
Oh yeah. I had to pay for the space on Vimeo for a year, so it'll be on there.
So what kind of a crowd did you have at You must have got a good reaction to this because it's.
It was phenomenal. I'm pretty heartened by that. So
that's what somebody was telling me. Our fella Bruce Bruce, our super fan #1. He was selling. He lives in Medford, Oregon, and he was saying one of his guys came back and said that was just spectacular.
Yeah, it worked, and it worked. It was great because to see it on the big screen is just another thing altogether. You work on it on your computer screen, and then you get it done, and you go, well, let's see how this is going to look. So put it on the big screen and the TV at home, and well, that looks good too. But it's another thing altogether sitting there in an auditorium with 400 other people and seeing it up there on the big screen. So
scenes from a dying Transcontinental.
There you go.
And it was all done. These are all photos done back in
77 to 80.
Yeah.
And then there were some updated pictures, portraits of many of the railroaders that I'd shot back then. I have tracked them down and photographed them today.
What about the music? How did you? There was one song in there I really liked them in the middle about trains, and the guy was singing. Kind of had that kind of Bob Dylan-y kind of thing going.
Well, I'd been wanting to do this show for a while, so I'd been kind of thinking in my mind songs that I wanted to do. And I think the first show that I did at Winter Ale in 78, I did do the song Dust in the Wind by Kansas, but I did want to keep that in there because that seems just a natural for
right. Oh, yeah.
The Abandoned Railroad. But I used an instrumental track this time. And I'm drawing a blank right now. My mind is a little foggy in the morning, but
Yeah, exactly. We're doing this in the morning because I just messaged you and I said, "Hey, Blair, are you around?" And you went, "Yeah," and I said, "Cool, let's
that's
talk."
true. Yeah. Well, I work afternoon shifts, so there's no incentive to get up early. So
So,
10:30 in the morning is like the crack of dawn to me, but that's okay.
so
But
I got a question for you because I'm looking at about the 2 minute 14-second mark right this minute,
mhm.
and it's a picture of looks like a Jeep 38, Jeep 40, and it's numbered 22 on the signboard.
SD40-2. Yep.
SD40-2. I knew that. I was just testing you.
Okay.
How did you like some of these locations are spectacular.
Well, you just got to walk into some of them,
Yeah.
and then there are a lot of spots you can pretty much drive to, but there are a lot of walk-in spots. You only had two, three at the best trains a day that you could get in daylight when you went out there on the Milwaukee Road. So you tended to chase a train the whole day.
Okay.
But there are some spots you walked into. Some of the bridges you park up by the right of way and then walk a couple miles into them. And there's some winter photographs in there that were a lot of walk-in shots.
Yeah,
one shot and you're done.
Yeah, and that's a lot. That's hard walking in all that way on ties. I mean, it's not the easiest walking going.
Oh no, and then a lot of these spots you'd have to walk up to the right of way, but they're up on the side of the mountain. So
yeah, exactly.
Walk a trail up through the woods or bushwhack your way up to the tracks.
So okay, so this locomotive here, it's got 22 on the signboard. So that's train 22. It's not locomotive 22.
Locomotive 22.
Really?
Yeah, Milwaukee. If you look at the history of the Milwaukee Road's diesel locomotives, it's so convoluted their whole numbering scheme. But a lot of these locomotives have been numbered 4 or 5 times. But this one, these 2-digit locomotives, these SD40-2s, for the most part, were delivered in those number series in 73, 74.
Wow. So
hopefully, scale trains will bring that out. Bring those remote locomotives out. So
yeah, if Todd Arnett, if you're listening to this, that would be cool. Get Shane Wilson to think about doing those Milwaukee Road and those low numbers because that's pretty cool.
I know Paul. I think Paul Ellis was modeling.
Yeah.
One of these remote locomotives. You had your masters and your slaves. Your
your
2-digit engines. So
all right, and here's one substation 26. So how long was it electrified? The railroad.
Milwaukee built into Puget Sound 1910, and I believe it was electrified 15, 17, 18. I'll have to look that up. Certainly by 1920 it was electrified, and electrification on the coast lasted until 1972.
Wow. So they stuck with the electrification.
Yeah, they pretty much had to. I mean, they tried to dump it in 73, and then the fuel crisis happened, so they brought it back on for one more year, but then eventually.
Yeah.
That's in Montana. By 72, it was shut down on the coast.
Right. Yeah.
It was essentially operated as 2 separate electrification systems. They didn't interchange locomotives very often between the Washington side and the Montana side.
At the 3-minute mark, there's a cool picture of a fella in his plaid shirt in the 70s hair.
Right.
He's a train dispatcher, obviously, or what? He's in the station.
Oh yeah, Jerry Bretschneider. Yeah, that was up at Cedar Falls. That's at the base of the mountains where the railroad had a branch line junction and maintained a helper station there until the end of the electrification. But Jerry actually grew up in Cedar Falls. His dad was the signal maintainer there, and he lived in Cedar Falls in the company housing. And then after he went away I think he went to college for a couple of years, but he got drafted. And when he came back from the military, he came back as a train order operator and had that job in afternoons at Cedar Falls.
And how hard was it back in the 70s? It must have been easy to talk to these guys and get in there and access them and all that stuff.
Well, I think one of the advantages I had was that I was just a teenager, so I wasn't seen as a threat. You go out there, you're an adult with a camera wandering around railroad property. Well, they're a little worried about you. I mean, employees are paranoid, for one, that you're some kind of management spy.
Right.
But when you're a 17-year-old kid, well, you're not seen as a threat. You're not seen as someone going in there to to rat them out for doing anything that isn't safe. And those were, you know how it was in Canada in the days. Same thing. You know, you could pretty much go around anywhere, and everyone was pretty friendly. You could hang out in depots, wander into roundhouses. You know,
so
it was a good time to do that.
Oh, no kidding! It was the end of normalcy.
That's right. Yeah.
So as you're doing this and you're putting it together, and even when you're presenting it, like, knowing that you did it when you're 17 and 18, it must kind of give you I'm trying to think what the word of the feeling would be. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I raced stock cars. Me and my buddy built a car, and we raced, you know, and I still have those memories. But it must be kind of, I don't know what the feeling would be that you get when you're putting this all together, like a feeling of, oh my God, I can't believe I did this, or.
Well, I didn't. It took me a while to come to grips with that. You know, on the day that I die, this is probably, at least from the hobby standpoint, what people are going to remember. So you have all your life to do, you know, your work, right?
Yeah.
And you do it when you're such a young kid. It's like that. That takes a little coming. I mean, it's not even that big a thing in the grand scheme of life, but it takes a little coming to terms with. But I'm happy with it. You know, I'm glad I did it, of course.
Yeah.
And glad I had the foresight to do this.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the foresight to do that.
But at the time, you don't know you're doing it. You know, if I was older, and I know of several other photographers who were probably in their 20s and 30s or even 40s at the time, who were photographing the Milwaukee Road out west, and they approached it like, you know, I'm going to do this picture and this picture, and I want to go see this operation and this. And for me, it was never like that, except in a couple cases very close to the end. I never went out thinking, okay, now I have to tick this off the list, so I have to do this. So it's just random. It was just, you know, a scatterbrained teenager just running out and ending up in places.
Yeah, so you were just literally doing it mostly because you like photographing trains, and you happened to be there, and you knew. And were you doing it saying to yourself, "This is the end of the Milwaukee Road," or were you doing it saying, oh boy, if I want to get some pictures of Milwaukee Road, I should do it now because
Well, not till the very end. I mean, you know, there was a lot of talk among the fans in Seattle, is the railroad going to shut down? And there were the old timer Seattle fans who thought, no, it'll never shut down. This will never happen. You know.
Yeah.
Employees were kind of realistic about the whole thing, and they kind of knew that it was going to shut down. And many of them jumped ship, went over to Burlington Northern or other railroads before the shutdown. But there were always those that maintained that the government wouldn't allow the railroad to shut down. Well, they were wrong on that. But, you know, you're young and you don't look too far down the road. I mean, you know, all through this thing, these people were friends out there, and I'd see these people when I'd see a lot of the same crews when I'd go out a lot, but I never really, I don't think I gave it a big, long-term perspective thought about, wow, when the railroad shuts down, what are these guys going to do? You know, I'm 19, I don't have any experience in my life as to what happens when you lose your job, you know, and you have a home and you have a family and bills and everything. I don't think about that. Hey, I just want to go out and make some pictures.
Yeah, I know.
So.
And it's all. Did you do any color? I mean, the presentation's all in black and white, but did you do any color?
I shot quite a bit of color over the 3 years that I photographed in Milwaukee, but and the color, there's some nice color images, but a lot of other people were shooting color, so I don't think it's anything I shot that anybody else really didn't have. But I was one of the few that was shooting a lot of black and white, and especially a lot of behind the scenes and human interest stuff.
Yeah.
So the black and white to me was really where the heart of my work on the Milwaukee Road was. At the time, I was going to either high school or community college, and I was working nights at the local newspaper, and because this is where I wanted to take my life is towards a career as a photojournalist. So I worked at the local newspaper doing clerk work in the newsroom, but the photographers there, you know, they'd give me weekend assignments, which was cool, and then they'd sneak me photo paper and chemicals and film, So they were really supportive of my work as well. So I kind of used the Milwaukee as kind of another way of getting experience in dealing with photographing people and learning, what to do as a photojournalist.
So now there's one shot around the 4-minute and 30-second mark of you're looking at the cab and there's a guy, probably the conductor or the engineer standing on the walkway. And did you get a lot of cab rides and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I had quite a few rides, and I might have asked for a couple, but as I became more of a regular out along the lines, crews would see me and they'd stop and I'd say, "You want a ride?" Or I'd be at a meeting point, they'd be in a siding and they'd say, "You want to ride with us?" And, if I had a way to get back to the car, sure.
Yeah.
Or if I was with someone. I think I abandoned a lot of friends that I was chasing with to go do cab rides.
Do you have a memorable cab ride during that time, or did they all kind of just run together? Or?
Well, there was one. Well, there were a couple that were memorable. One was I was out with a group of friends, and we knew it was near the end, so it was the next to last ride, next to last train out of Tacoma, and the train got done with picking up these cars at Black River Junction near Renton, and I knew the conductor. I knew the head brakeman pretty well, Don Freeman, and Don said, "You want to ride with us?" And I said, "Sure." And I asked the guys if I was who were driving me around, our group that we were chasing with, and I said, "You pick me up at the top of the mountain?" They said, "Sure." So we did that, but we got up the mountain, and the snow had been falling, and we had to stop and cut off the power and run up to the summit to plow, so we didn't stall. So by the time I finally got up to Hyack, the top of the mountain, it was well after dark, and I don't think the folks that were my escorts for the day were very pleased about that. But I think the most memorable trip I had was in the summer of '79. I had, through a mutual friend, I had been contacted by a couple guys who were working with the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission, who would have to approve or deny the abandonment request. And a couple of these guys were just staffers out of Washington, D.C., but one of them was a rail fan. And what they were doing is they had worked on building the environmental impact statement about what would happen, if the railroad was abandoned, what it would do to the environment. But,
right.
So they were out in the Seattle area working on this case, and they had the weekend off. So they called me up and they said, "Hey, we'd sure like to go chase a train." So I said, "Okay, let's do that." So we met up. I forgot where we met up, but they picked me up in this blue sedan, the U.S. government motor pool sedan.
Right.
Very G-man looking. And we went off and chased this train. Well, so happened I knew the brakeman on the head end of this train as well. And when they got out to this small town of Kittitas, I think they were meeting another train. He invited me up into the cab, and I rode with them to the division point at Othello at the end of their crew run. The interesting thing about that is my friends in the blue government motor pool car were chasing this train all the way to Othello as well, and every time they'd take a shot of the train and hop back in the car and go tearing off on the dirt roads ahead of the train, the conductor on the rear would alert the head end that there were these guys in this government vehicle chasing us, and it's sinister. And the engineer on the head end, Gilly Jacobs, he would say, "It's the CIA," and so this happened 3 or 4 times. It's quite a hoot.
Yeah,
they were having a good time with that. So.
That's a great story. Boy, pretty ramshackle, at the end.
Oh, I think the railroad was pretty ramshackle after it was built. I don't think they really did a lot for upgrading facilities. I know pretty much everything on the west end of the railroad was as it was built when the railroad was built in the teens. The only thing I can really think that they built that was fairly modern, they built a new passenger station in '54, and they only ran passenger trains for like 5 or 6 more years after that to Tacoma.
Yeah.
But everything else was pretty much just right out of the 20s when it was built. I mean, the crews were staying in bunkhouses that were built at right in the 20s, and the depots were the original depots, and a lot of the rail was, they didn't change the rail out a lot. I don't think there was ever any welded rail out on the railroad.
No.
The story was that they dumped a bunch of welded rail to put in the mid 70s, but then they pretty much decided at that point, well, let's not put the money into this railroad because we're going to abandon it. So they came back and they pulled up all the welded rail that they dropped on the ground and took it to the east end of the railroad. So yeah, the thing was a ramshackle mess. It was, it was just falling apart.
So 2 questions I had just thought. What was it like talking? So did you hook up with some of the guys that you were saying you were trying to track down, guys for in the retirement and that, and kind of interview them and stuff like that? Have you tracked many of those guys down?
Oh yeah, I've talked to well over a dozen of them, and some were easier to find than others, and some were just shots in the blue. Do a search online for an address, and maybe this would be the guy, and I'd send them prints of photographs, just paper prints of photographs and a cover letter, and send it off to them and see what happens. And pretty much everyone that I had contacted that were actually the people that I was trying to get a hold of called me right back.
Yeah,
they were surprised.
I bet they were pretty excited to talk to you.
Oh, they were pretty floored that and a lot of them didn't remember anything about it, but they said, "Well, there I am." One guy, he got an envelope in the mail from Texas, and he's thinking, "Well, is this some kind of retirement scheme that someone's trying to take my money?" Because I don't know who this person is. But he said, I opened it up, and he says, and there were pictures of me from 40 years ago in a letter, and he says, I didn't remember you at all, but I told my wife, I said, come over here, check this out. So we got in touch. So it's been good. I've done phone interviews with most of those guys, and have been out to see most of them as well, 1-to-1. So
wow, so
that's been real heartening. That's been for me the most gratifying part of all of this.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm getting at. It's one of those things. You did it at 18, 19 years old, and now here you are, and
right.
30 years later, 35 years later, and you're having this opportunity to all this stuff you did.
Right.
Is now making these guys' lives. These guys would be really happy to talk to you and see you and see the pictures. And I mean, you're really making an impact on people's lives.
Well, here's the thing about these Milwaukee guys is no matter whatever railroad they ended up after the Milwaukee, deep in their heart, that's where their heart is at. It's with the Milwaukee. And I think they had such a camaraderie, working for the railroad in such dire circumstances. It's like soldiers on the front line in the bunker,
Yeah.
or in the trenches. They band together, and even though it might have been miserable times, they can look back at it with some kind of affection.
And this is all going towards a book that you're hoping to write.
Yep, working on a book. I don't know when it'll be out. I'd like to get it out by 2020, which would be the 40th anniversary of the railroad shutting down.
And this was this the 40th anniversary of Winter Rail?
This was the 40th anniversary calendar-wise of Winter Rail. Now, the first Winter Rail was actually in December of 78. It was actually later in the winter. And so the actual 40th anniversary of the first Winter Rail show isn't till December of this year. But
right.
This is the 40th that they've done. Correct.
And it's in the 40th year. So
right. Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to have to do something spectacular for 50.
Yeah. Wonder what somebody's going to do for 50. I pretty much, this is all that I can do for the Milwaukee, I think. I don't think I can. I really don't want to revisit this show. I mean, this is this for me, and I've thought, because every year we have a get together at a friend's place here in town. He has every Labor Day weekend here in the fall, in the late summer, and he has a get together where everyone shows photos. So, I've done a couple other Milwaukee Road things since then, but this is the thing really that I sunk my heart into, and it was definitely an outgrowth out of the research that I've been doing for this book.
Yeah, and you don't want to. This is somehow you want to keep this available to. I mean, train guys forever are going to want to see this. I mean, I was never a Milwaukee Road fan, other than some of my buddies liked it, and the paint scheme was cool, and blah blah blah. But this is something I could watch 20 years from now and be just as enthralled in it as I was the first time I saw it.
Well, I think the topic of railroaders and I think the topic's universal. I mean, not just Milwaukee Road, but just passage of time and how things change, and
Yeah.
how railroaders look back on their experience, on their shared experiences on the railroad. And I think that overriding theme is pretty much universal. I mean, I got I got really warm reaction from the show from the Winter Rail show, but I got the greatest reaction from railroaders, not just Milwaukee railroaders, but people who work for the railroad, even young guys who are working for the railroad now. I mean, they just loved it. I mean, it just because it spoke to them and put their whole career or their whole job in a greater continuum. You know, it goes back from the time that the railroad was built and the people who are working on these railroads now. I mean, they're all just part of a chain from the beginning of the railroad to now. It's like everyone has done their part over the last 100-some years.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, they all fit into it somewhere.
And a show like this is just I watched it 3 times. And I'll probably watch it again after today. Now that we're talking, because I just thought it was exquisitely done. It had a good pace to it. It was unbelievably interesting. The music was good. You know, it was just everything about it was, and I guess it was exciting to know that I know the guy and interviewed Blair, and I can call Blair at least a good acquaintance now. And it was just it's like when you know somebody and and I have some semblance of what is involved. So you took a lot of time and effort and made a beautiful thing that man, you could put this on a PBS station and people could watch it over and over. It's a top quality piece of work that I highly recommend that anybody that's within earshot of us right now, I highly recommend that you go watch it. I will put the link on the website with the description of the episode. That's what we'll do.
Excellent.
And that's well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. Like I say, tomorrow on April 2nd is the first part of the Blair Kooistra month, and April 16th, my birthday, by the way. Don't spend a lot. April 16th will be the second part. So I thought right in the middle, in that week in the middle, I'll put in we can talk again and talk about this specifically because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to, and it gives me a chance to gush all over you. And you know, like even at the 8-minute mark, I'm looking at this photo here of a whole bunch of empty, pulpwood cars, and it's just, you're thinking it looks like they're just stuck in a parking lot. Just have, and you're one of those guys that has an eye for photography. You're just a top-notch photographer. Like I was talking to Chris Adams Chris Atkins. Lots of times I call him Chris Adams just to be. Chris Adams is one of those really fit guys that lives in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and he's always riding his bike or jogging.
I confuse him with Chris Atkins.
Yeah. Chris Adams, like I say, he's one of those fit guys. One of those guys where us guys that are slightly on the heavier side, that when they're walking by, you just want to trip them.
Yeah. It's not enough that we're doing our exercise by walking slowly.
Yeah, exactly. With those big strides, and you got the shorts and the water bottle, and it's like get lost.
Yeah. I'll say that this this photography started like probably late '76, early '77, and I had just started picking up a camera by then for not very long. So. In looking through all these photographs when I was putting this together, actually pulling photos out that might be good for the book, I just noticed a big learning curve was going on with my photography. And sometime around late '78, I started to get it. I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to photograph. It was pretty hit and miss before that, but just looking at the body of work, it's just amazing to see how it progressed over the years, just over that period. So it was a pretty formidable time.
Yeah, and there's
a photographer.
At 9:24, I'm looking at a picture of a guy in one of the shops, and I'm thinking, you just had the whole run of the railroad. You're just walking everywhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the roundhouse foreman there in the afternoons in Tacoma, he just pretty much let me have a run of the place. Go through file cabinets, go ahead, but no one hassled you. I was never challenged,
Yeah.
I never saw any railroad police guys. There's a kind of a funny story. Is after I did this article for Trains magazine that came out in '79, and I was up in the Cascades in the winter in early 1979 when they were running a rotary plow to remove the snow, and stayed out of everybody's way and all that. And they had they had a roadmaster and a road foreman on board, so the local officials were on this thing, so I didn't want to get in anybody's ways. But the next year, or that summer after the magazine article came out, I was bringing some copies of it down to the Roundhouse guys in Tacoma, and I ran into the road foreman, who's kind of an imposing, kind of burly guy.
Right.
And he called me over, and I went, "Oh boy, okay,
Yeah.
Something's going to happen here." And he says, "I saw that magazine article, and if you just let me know that you were working on that when we were up there running the rotary, I would have had you come aboard with us for the day."
Oh, Jesus.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I think railroaders had an idea that the railroad was going to go down in flames, and I think that they didn't mind me having me around there. I think they knew that there was, it was getting documented one way or the other.
Yeah, that's cool. And I want to talk to you about the part where the guys are cleaning the F unit and putting the white flags on it.
I put that in there strictly. There were a lot of other things I could have put in this show that I didn't, that were kind of of a personal nature. But I put this in because the guys who were in this, photographed in this, are, at least 2/3. All of them were at this winter rail. And 2 of the 3 were highly instrumental in the whole history of winter rail. That was
Really?
Vic Nebbs, who today pretty much owns the franchise of winter rail, and Wayne Monger, who was a long time one of the roadies, and he's highly still involved with winter rail. He's in California, and at the time, these guys were long-haired hippie freaks in the late '70s, living in California, and they were part of a group that defined themselves as the Foamites. Now, this term "foamer," which is a universal term now,
Right.
to describe rail fans, was pretty much just a term that wasn't known in the rail fan community back at this time. And they just called themselves foamers. Supposedly, when the 4449, the steam engine, was on the Freedom train back in the mid-'70s, one of the crew members had gotten on the radio and said, "There's a foamer behind every signal post." Okay. And these guys, these kids, they were probably in their teens, early 20s, just a few years older than me, but not much, heard this on the radio, and they thought that was pretty funny. So they started calling themselves the Foamers, or Foamites, which they turned an acronym.
Yeah.
They made an acronym out of it. And they would have they do a lot of trips together all over California, and then every year they do what they call the Foamathon, where they would pile up all their stuff into a pickup truck with a shell, and they'd take off for 2 weeks to go photograph, back when you could do that when you were young and living at your parents' house and had money.
Yeah.
So, the group included Ken Meeker, who Ken was well known. He's passed away several years, but Ken worked for Western Pacific as a clerk at the time, and you had Wayne Monger, and Wayne became highly involved with the Feather River Railroad Society and the Western Pacific Historical Society, and is now involved with the Cascade Rail Foundation. And you had Vic Nebbs, who was working for the Postal Service in Oakland, and now is retired, and he's living up in Corvallis, Oregon, actually Albany, Oregon. And that is why winter rail ended up in Oregon after 37 or 38 years in California. Winter rail was started by Dave Stanley, who was a railroader who worked for the WP at the time.
Right.
And he started this in 78, and it was kind of an outgrowth of slideshows that were put together in Oregon previous to that by two fellows, Rod Loader and Ed Austin. They had A&L slideshow, what they had every year. They called it colloquial, it was called the Loaderthon.
I know. I've heard that name, Rod Loader, before.
Rod Loader, yeah, he's an SP modeler and an electrician, and he builds CTC boards for people now.
Oh, okay.
But so he's retired, but he's still living up there. But they'd have these Loaderthons in the Albany, Salem area, I think, in Oregon, and then I think Dave Stanley kind of picked up on that and decided to have one in California and call it Winter Rail, and that started in 78.
Wow.
Was there until I think 2000. Well, at some point, Dave, I think it was like the mid 80s, Dave was more involved with family and on the road too much with the railroad, so he turned it over to Vic, and Vic has run with it since then. Vic moved it up to Oregon after he retired and left the Bay Area.
Jeez. So
that's the story of the guys who were cleaning the locomotive up. So this was one of these foamites, as they called themselves, because partially because of Ken Meeker's employment of Western Pacific, and his father was an officer at the Western Pacific. They were able to put the bug in somebody's ear at the WP to repaint their old F units when they were all beat up and ready to be retired, but they rebuilt them because they didn't want to spend any money on new locomotives. They wanted to get bought by the Union Pacific. So they rebuilt these F units and repainted them. This was like in 1978. And these foamites would build replacement station signs and put them up on Altamont Pass. And then they take these trips all over the West to photograph F units. And they ended up in Tacoma, contacted me because we were all, back in pre-internet days, a lot of phone calls, and, we were all contributing to the CTC board magazine. That's how we kind of got in touch with each other.
Well, they
ended up in Tacoma as part of their trip, and
wow,
cleaned up the F unit, put flags on. Crew was amazed,
So they got
away with that crap today, man. They kick you off the property.
I know, that's what I mean. So they got up there and they cleaned the F unit and put flags on it.
Right.
And was it an extra? Was the F unit an extra? I mean, the white flags doesn't that?
Well, in the rule book it would be, but by this date, the rule book must be adhered to. They started doing this white flag thing on the Western Pacific when these F units were repainted. They would haul white flags with them when they'd go out chasing trains, and the crews would say, "Oh, sure, yeah, go ahead, put the white flags on." Yeah. Sure.
Swiss. That is just the coolest. And then you photographed it. How many photos did you have to choose from to do all this?
Well, I would say that I have a big file drawer of Milwaukee Road negatives, and out of that, I would say raw numbers with the black and white frames that I scanned to try to whittle down for this book project that this slideshow, this photo show, is an outgrowth of. I had about 1,200 photographs, and this was whittled down to about 200 or so.
Wow, this is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So, what's the actual name? The actual name of it is it Remembering Milwaukee Road's Coast, or is it what's it called? Hang on, it's Scenes from a Dying Transcontinental.
There you go. Scenes from a Dying Transcontinental.
All right, cool. That's what I'll call it. So, because here's my problem. And you can help me out with this. So, we've got you got your basic Blair Kooistra Part 1. And then usually on the off weeks, I put in some, maybe my life story or something like that. And then you got and the second week or this third Monday of the month, you're going to have your Blair Kooistra Part 2. But I had made no plans for this third part. So I'm thinking I don't want to call it Part 3 because that'll be 1, 3, and 2. You
could call it 1A.
Yeah, or I could call.
But then they think you're just talking Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. See, it's not that easy having a podcast. People think it's just me talking. I mean, there's a lot of, there'll be a lot of hand wringing and carrying on now for the next week, trying to decide what to call this. So.
Well, you'd be carrying on regardless, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And hand wringing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I hand wring. Go ahead.
I think the first time we talked, this show wasn't even discussed.
No.
It was something that I was thinking, I'm going to take care of after the new year.
Yeah.
But I hadn't even really given it too much thought.
Yeah, and your wife is yelling at you now.
Well, she's yelling at the kids, but she can yell through the door. The door's closed.
All right, so I'm going to call this. I'm going to come up with some catchy name from this because I think we talk about this in part 2. And this, I did not want to have your interviews and then not touch on what I consider. Part of the reason I'm so excited about this is because I bought this new TV about 6 months ago, and it's hooked to the internet. And then when somebody posted it on one of our groups on Facebook, he posted the link. So I figured out how to get the internet up on my TV, and then I scrolled around and I got to it, and I was able to watch this on my 55-inch 4K TV. It was sweet.
Nice.
Yeah, it was sweet. And I get to the end of it, and I'm like, okay, I'm watching that again.
Good. All right.
But
no Leafs game on that night, I guess.
I didn't care. Once I got it started, man, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. This is Leafs have clinched the playoff spot already too, but there's still like 5 games in the season to go, and they've already clinched the playoff spot.
Nothing to worry about now.
Yeah, and then I like this part at the end where you talk about the individual guys. Jeff Jensen, hired out of high school in Ellsberg. I liked all that part. That was really cool too.
Well, that was the toughest part to figure out how I want to do it. I didn't want to do a voiceover over the music. And at the same time, you don't want to put too many words up, so people have to read the words and look at the pictures, and then the picture disappears before you get through the words. So that was kind of the toughest part of putting the whole thing together.
Yeah, and do you have any? Is there a way to keep track of how many views you get on this?
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, I think you can go to the Vimeo page and click on links, and you can see what countries everyone was looking at it from.
Cool. All right, so we'll see if
go Romania.
Yeah, exactly. Go Romania. Yeah, I know. That's the podcast has been downloaded in 90 countries around the world. Like it's been downloaded in China like 500 times, and I'm thinking, I don't see how they're getting anything that I'm saying in China.
Well, I didn't think they even had internet that you could get to.
I know, that's right.
Government approved. So you know what? Maybe you're government approved.
Well, then the funny thing,
put a seal on your website, approved by the Red Chinese.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the funny thing was, just after the podcast started, pretty quickly I got up to 12 downloads in Russia. Within the first 3 or 4 months. And then it stopped. For 2 years, it stayed at 12 downloads. So
there are a fair number of U.S. prototype model. Well, I don't know if they're prototype modelers, but modelers in Russia who, buy U.S. stuff.
I know. I think the hobby is huge in Russia.
I sold a UP caboose to Russia.
Yeah.
It was funny because I custom painted this caboose, and I said, well, I don't need this. I put it up, and the guy bought it off eBay. So I sent it to him, and I'm thinking, well, this is kind of wild. I'm sending this caboose that I built to Russia. So I type in the address on Google Maps, and it shows me where this guy lives, up in Siberia, and lives in some big concrete, Soviet-era apartment complex.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I think model railroading in Russia is huge. I think it's huge. I think the hobby, this podcast has taught me that this hobby is huge. It's absolutely massive. And
right.
And it's like I said it to somebody. We were doing some show the other day, and like I got way more shows than I have time, and I were doing some show, and I said the internet has made it like after the nuclear blast, all the model railroaders are coming out of their bunkers.
Yeah, but because of the electromagnetic pulse, they won't be able to run any.
Yeah, but they're like they were convinced that they were the only ones that survived the nuclear war, and they're coming out of their bunkers, and here's all these other model railroaders, and they're like, I didn't, it'll be guys down the street, and they go, I didn't know you were a model railroad. Yeah, my dad did it. No, it's like, it's crazy how it's changing the hobby. All right.
Yeah, sweet.
All right. So, okay, I'm going to give out our email address. Our email address is not a modelers. I always do that. It's modelerslife@gmail.com. That's modelers with one L like Blair, not two L's like Lionel. And we have our website, modelerslife.com. And if you go there, you're going to see the little introduction to this episode. And in the introduction, I'm going to put the link to this video, so you can just click on the link and it'll take you right to the video. And then we also have links to our Facebook page and our Patreon page. And when I was on a podcast review show, and they say that I should mention Patreon. So, okay, go to Patreon, pay $5 a month, and you can have more stuff. You can listen to me more often, which would make everybody excited. Blair, this is so cool, Blair. I am so cool. I'm so glad we hooked up and did this, because I think what you've done here, I am so excited by the fact that in today's world, Blair can take all his photos and make something that's as of the same quality you would see on any PBS station in the country. And
thanks a lot.
And you can do it at home, and I highly recommend. It's going to take you just under 30 minutes to watch the whole thing, and you will not be, if you're a rail fan of any sort, of any railroad in the world, you're going to like this video.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So now it's time to say goodbye.
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 Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. We're back. I started the outro, but now we're back. Time out. I'll do the sound of a record scratch. So what were you just saying? After I turned the button off, Blair says to me about how did I like the sound, and then he starts telling me, so these were recorded? These sounds were recorded.
There are two segments in the show. At the opening segment, and about, 6 minutes in there, 5 minutes in there.
Yep.
They were recorded by a fellow named Carl Sonner, and he was on vacation along the Milwaukee Road in 1979, and made several sound recordings. And both of these recordings that I used, let me use these recordings. Thank you very much, Carl. Were from the actual locations where I made the photographs that accompanied the sound. The opening sequence of a train going by the depot at Kittitas was an actual eastbound train throttling up for the grade. And there was a sequence near the first sound break, or the first song break, about 6 minutes in or so, of a train climbing the Saddle Mountains with helpers. And that was also a recording of his, of a westbound train climbing the grade. And it's just amazing he had these recordings.
And
so
how
I didn't have to use just, cheesy generic recordings, right?
And how'd you find him again?
Ryan Reed, who's a modeler and a Milwaukee Road enthusiast. He lives in Cheney, Washington. He put me in touch with him. He mentioned he had these recordings and put me in touch with him. And the cool thing, especially on that first run by, is the horn on that locomotive. These Milwaukee 3-chime Leslies just had a tendency to vibrate and crackle. And just the first time I heard that recording, it just really brought it all back to me. Yep, that's a Milwaukee Road horn. So
that's oddly enough, that's the first group that I ever played lead guitar in back in the early 70s.
What, the S3 Leslies?
3-chime Leslies.
3-chime Leslies. Excellent.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else I'm not gonna turn this off again, and you're gonna come up with some other nugget about this, are you?
No, I'll let you go.
You probably have endless amounts of nuggets. I just need to know the right questions to ask.
Well, I'll tell you what, when the book comes out, we'll do another one.
That's a good idea. So
right.
You'll have to keep me. So where are we right now on the book? How is progress going? How do you feel you're doing?
Book is a massive project. I don't have a publisher, so I have to put something together to try to shop this thing around. And without an editor, really, to tell me where I should go with this. I mean, I know where I want to go with it, but the whole structure, how I want to put this together, how I want to put the thing together is kind of a quandary right now. But I'm working through that. There's a lot of, there's all these interviews with people. There's, oral history. Should I have a lot of oral history? Should I?
Yeah, you should
integrate oral history with the photos, or have the oral history in a separate section and separated by groups of photographs.
No, oral history. Yeah. The oral history should be with the photos, because people are fascinated the most by are people. That
right.
We are people. We are on this planet as people. So interacting with other people, regardless of whether you're a white supremacist and you hate people, or you're a person like us that love people in general and want to connect people and make the world a better place. People want to the oration of people is what people want to hear and see. That's what makes us go. So I say put the photos with the oration. What's that word?
The
oration. Would you use the word? You used a big word. I only have a vocabulary of 27 words.
I know what you want there. Yeah. But see, you're doing the same thing here with each of these interviews. You're building this big database, or not database, but this big catalog of oral histories of people.
Yeah. Well,
with this period in our history and in our society of how people interact through the hobby. I mean, it's the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I was so excited to talk to you, because I guess the real connection you and I made is back in this when you had your first articles published, and me reading Trains over the years, and always
Sure.
and seeing your name pop up. I'm like, oh yeah, Blair Kooistra. I know that name. And of course, it's as a kid, you don't want to be Blair Kooistra. You want to be Pete Williams, or you want to be Sam Spade. Didn't want to be Lionel Strang, but it's like now that I'm 63, there's like, oh, Lionel Strang, that's an easy name to there's not a whole lot of us roaming the earth.
Right, that's true.
And I can't imagine there's a whole lot of Blair Kooistras roaming the earth either.
No, I doubt there aren't many of them.
Yeah, the best part is I finally realized the best part of having my name is when the internet started to come and I wanted to get email addresses. I can have LionelStrang@gmail.com. I can have LJStrang@gmail.com.
I got Lionel Strang 28.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just me, so that's it. All right.
Right.
That's it. Now you promise when I turn this off, there's not going to be any other cool thing you're going to tell me.
Yeah, I'll shut up.
All right. So say goodbye again, Blair.
Goodbye.
It's another Lincoln Homer.